The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Labour Party will be supporting the third reading of this, as we've indicated right through the process. Since Red Peak has come up, we would work with the Parliament in order to find a process whereby Red Peak could be included. And Red Peak included as one of a number of choices. I want to indicate that, unlike my leader, who seems to think it has some merit, I think it has no merit whatsoever. But that is something that will be put before the people of New Zealand, and I will be prepared to lay some money on the fact that it will not be amongst the final two on the preferential system, because all of the polling that many of us have seen on this has this flag when it is considered by members of the public in an unbiased way, sitting somewhere between the two Lockwood designs, the awful thing which is apparently a koru, and the very, very poorly drawn fern that was selected by the panel. And I just want to say and place back on the record, it's a point that I made in the committee stages, that there are a number of people on the panel who I've got a lot of time for, a number of them who I was involved in recommending. John Burrows is clearly an eminent New Zealander. People like Rod Drury and Sir Brian Lahore are people who I have an enormous amount of time for, but I think they made an error in not, the government made an error in taking the decision to take the design people who were part of the recommendations from the cross-party group off and not include them, and I think there was a problem with the panel, the balance of the panel as a result of that. There was an extra problem as a result of the politicisation of it by the people who were put on, and I think as a result of that we ended up with what colleagues might describe politely as suboptimal options coming through the process. And while we can have a debate about Red Peak and whether that should be included or not, I think it's fair to say that the ones that have come through the process are designs which are either pretty unappealing or excessively complicated. The Lockwood designs, I know Kyle Lockwood. He's a good New Zealander, awful political views, but living offshore, but doing what he thinks important for the country around passports and around this issue. I admire him for doing that. But I must say, if we are to make a change, if we were to make a change, and long term I think we will make a change, we got to make a change to something which kids can draw, which is easily recognisable and kids can draw. Red Peak, I think it's fair to say, meets the kids can draw criteria, but I think fails for a number of other reasons. Through this debate, Mr. Chair, generally has been done, has been in pretty good humour. I think it's fair to say that I've had to spend a little bit of time correcting the Greens as to the way the Constitution works, and I do want to place it on the record that if Parliament wanted Red Peak in here, we could have had legislation which added Red Peak to the current decisions. We didn't do that. Now, Gareth Hughes seemed to indicate that it would be rude for Parliament to indicate to the Governor-General what we thought. Well, that's just nonsense. Every week the Governor-General signs off legislation which indicates what Parliament thinks and the Governor-General assents to it. If Parliament really wanted the Red Peak flag here, we should have been straightforward and just added to it. But as I think as has been indicated, there was to me during the committee stages, while this bill's got Mr English's name on it, some of the earlier drafting mightn't have quite had the professional support that was necessary to get it into the form which did what's logical, and as a result of that there was a pretty bad mismatch between the explanatory note and the and the actual legislation. You know, that's not a massive crime. It's just sloppy, and I think it's pretty bad that the government picked up a bill that was drafted in such a sloppy way and put a minister's name on it. I do, as I have on one or two other occasions, want to acknowledge the superior judgment in this general process of the Right Honourable Winston Peters and his New Zealand First team. He recognised that right from the beginning of this process, it wasn't one of good faith. It was one of predetermination, and he declined, and his team declined to be part of the cross-party group. Now, I'm probably more innocent in these matters, more trusting in these matters, and I trusted the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister when they indicated that there was an attempt to make this process one which was genuinely multi-partisan, and we could work through it as a team and as a parliament, and as has been placed on the record of the parliament before, despite the honourable efforts of Jonathan Young, and I don't want to in any way impugn his integrity. He was, to a certain extent, steamrollered in his chairing of that group. There were some things which the group put up. There were some names which the group put up, which were rejected by the Cabinet. Now, so I think it's fair to say that, like Gareth Hughes was naive as far as some of the processes in the House are concerned, I was naive as far as the accepting of the possibility of the National Party working on a genuine multi-party basis and accepting the decisions of the group. So I think right from the beginning, there's been a degree of misleading as part of the process, and we're seeing it now. Right to the point where we're being misled into by the explanatory note and the comparison with the bill. Labour Party put up a couple of amendments during the process. There is it's a well-rehearsed issue around the yes-no vote at the beginning of the process. It's the process that was used when MMP was brought in. The Prime Minister says it's too complicated, but to be absolutely fair to John Key, I don't think he was in the country at the time we switched to MMP. So he maybe doesn't understand that New Zealanders are bright enough to understand the difference between yes and no. But they were. 85% of New Zealanders indicated that they want to change the parliamentary system when faced with and that member over there was roundly rejected, and did he come third or fourth in the Ohario electorate? Did that member come third or fourth? And he is only here as a result of MMP. He's only here as a result of MMP, and I think him chipping, saying that New Zealanders are too thick to understand a yes/no vote is maybe he's right. Maybe he's right.
Come back to it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was only reacting. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, the point that I want to make is that New Zealanders are bright enough to understand yes/no. They are bright enough to save $7 million, but this Parliament has repeatedly refused to give them that right. And what I really regret is that the principal position of the Greens, right back in the multi-party group, has been abandoned because John Key said, if you don't go along with this for the whole deal, then we won't support your bill and won't give you kudos. Look, I've seen the front page of the Don Post, and if Gareth Hughes really thinks getting his photo on the front page with John Key is good for the Greens in the longer term, then let him believe that. Mr. Chairman, I don't, and it is my view that at some stage the Greens will regret this. But, Mr. Speaker, actually this whole debate is irrelevant. because now I think it's up to 74% of New Zealanders don't want to change the flag, and that being the case, actually, we're wasting time.